Are you thinking of moving abroad, but not even really sure how to choose where to go? Well, don't worry, because in this video, I'm going to go over the most important factors that you need to consider to help you choose where exactly you should move to. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Seppi, rhymes with Peppy from SheHitRefresh.com, and I help women age 30 and over break free from a life of routine and move abroad or travel the world long term. I myself made the move from Texas to Spain in 2015 at the age of 35. I'm now 42, I'm still living in Spain and loving my life. And if you want to move abroad, please give my videos a like, subscribe to my channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on any move abroad content. In this video, I'm not going to list the best countries or cities to move to, because even though there are certain countries and cities that consistently rank at the top of these best cities for expats or Americans lists, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're the right places for you. What's best for one person isn't always the best fit for someone else. So instead, I want to help you by letting you know what to consider when thinking about making your move so that you can identify the best place that's the best fit for you. But just to give you an example, Switzerland often ranks on all of these lists, and while it's a great place to live, personally, it's not my favorite. And that's because I prefer to live in a country that has warmer weather, a much lower cost of living, and I love the Mediterranean culture, so I like to be here next to the sea. So it's important to remember when thinking about the best place for you, just remember that there's no such thing as the perfect place. You're gonna have to make some compromises no matter where in the world you choose to move to, but if you take into consideration the factors that I'm gonna go over, hopefully that'll help you find the best place that suits your needs and wants. But before we jump into my list, I just want to give my weekly shout out to, is it Aristides Olaveria, who commented on my video, 12 in-demand remote jobs that you can do from anywhere. And Aristides says, "So glad I found your page. You're so informative and I love the way you break things down. Thank you so much for these videos." Well, thank you. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I appreciate you sharing your thoughts with me. And if you too would like to get a shout out here on my channel, just leave a comment or question below, and you may be one of the lucky people that I pick their comment to share here. All right, let's get into it. This is a criteria that you can use to help you choose where to move abroad. When you're thinking about where to choose to move abroad, the first thing you should do is to consider what region of the world you want to move to. If you're an American, a lot of Americans are moving to Europe, Asia, and South America, but there's a big world out there, so you really need to think about which region of the world you want to move to, and some things to help you maybe pinpoint which region is to think about what proximity you want to be from where you're from. Central and South America are really popular for Americans because it is really quick to get home in case if you need to get back for an emergency or just to go back to visit family and friends. But another thing to consider is maybe also your culture, the kind of culture you want to explore. If you come from a Latin background but maybe never lived in Latin America, maybe that's somewhere you want to go to more explore your roots. Or maybe you want to go somewhere completely different and you want to go to Asia to go to experience a culture that you're very unfamiliar with. So keep that in mind, but definitely think about which region of the world you want to move to. Okay, and that leads us to our second factor that we need to consider when moving abroad, and that is if you can get a visa to live there. So what does that really mean? Well, that means that if you have a particular country in mind, you really need to see if they have a visa or residency option that will allow you to live there, because just because you want to move somewhere doesn't mean that it's actually possible. So let's take, for example, Australia. Australia is actually a really difficult country to move to because there's not a lot of viable visa options there for the average person. So if you really want to move to Australia, it's going to be very difficult to impossible. So maybe you need to start considering a different country in the world, one that you can actually find a viable visa option for. So how do you know what your viable visa options are? Well, it depends. One, you can check on the embassy and consulate of the country that you want to move to see what visa options they have and what the requirements for them are. But also you can find resources that are already out there. For example, if you want to move to Europe and you're an American, or actually with any background that you have, I actually wrote a book called I'm Outta Here, An American's Ultimate Visa Guide to Living in Europe. So I did the research, I went through 44 different European countries, and I identified the 17 easiest countries to move to based on viable visa options. So this means in this book, you're going to find over 50 viable visa options for you to use to come move to Europe long term. So I've already done the research for you. But if you're looking to move to another region in the world, definitely do your homework, Google it, join Facebook expat groups, and ask around to see what viable visa options there are for you. All right, number 3, the third thing that you should consider when thinking about where to move in the world is climate. So climate can really be a deal breaker for some people. I mean, anybody else hate the cold like me? So whether you thrive in warm sunshine or sweater weather, like understanding the climate will definitely help you narrow down your options. And it's important to know what your preferences are. I'm from Texas, so I definitely need warm weather and sunshine for the majority of the year. So I would not do well in a place like Finland, let's say. And definitely check where you want to move. What are the average temperatures throughout the year? What kind of seasons do they have? Is there a lot of rain, wind, gray skies? Understand what you're getting into, and also understand if you are moving somewhere warm that maybe ACs aren't as popular there as they may be, let's say if you're coming from the US. So understand if you're going to have access to heaters and air conditionings, and also what the electric cost is going to be, because a lot of places are going to be much more expensive in terms of energy than the United States. All right, the fourth thing to consider when thinking about where you want to move abroad is size. Yes, size matters. So do you like a big bustling city with lots to do, or somewhere much quieter that's more laid back? This is going to be important to understand what kind of city you want to live in. Do you want to live in a village, a town, a big, medium, small-sized city? Or are you more interested in living maybe in a neighborhood of a big city to have that proximity to all the action but not live in the middle of it? And so that leads me to number 5 on the list here, which is location. I mean, do you want to have access to nature? Is that important to you? Do you want to be near the water, near the mountains? Do you want to be near an international airport so it's easy to get in and out of the city that you're living in? Or do you not mind traveling a few hours to the closest airport? So in my personal case, here in Spain, probably the 2 most popular cities that people think about when they want to move here are Madrid and Barcelona. And for me, it was a no-brainer. I knew where I wanted to live, and that was Madrid. I love those big city vibes. And so Madrid just felt like the right city for me. But I know for a lot of people, living near the water and the sea is very alluring. And so a lot of people choose Barcelona because of that factor. Okay, number 6 is transportation. So if you're living in the US, you may be living in a city that is based around car culture. And for me, it was really important to move somewhere where I did not need a car, because in Houston, I was living in my car most of the day, sitting in traffic and driving for miles on end just to get anywhere. For me, Madrid was a perfect choice, again, because it's so well connected. So think about transportation in the terms of what kind of public transportation you're gonna have. Is it well connected? Do you have a lot of options? Is it just subway and buses, or do you have trams and urban railways? Can you get around easily, not only within the city, but within the country as well? And if it is city or country where you are going to need a car, you're going to have to think about the cost of what that means. How much is it going to be to buy a car, upkeep for your car, and all the factors that come along with car ownership. Oh, and one more thing, if you are going to be driving abroad or want a car abroad, definitely check and see if your license is transferable, because in some countries, they may require you to have an international driver's license or even get a local license, which may mean that you have to take your driving test all over again. When choosing to move abroad, number 7 is super important. And number 7 is healthcare. So you're going to have to understand how much healthcare is going to cost you abroad. The good thing is that healthcare abroad is actually quite affordable, especially when you compare it to the US. But understand what the costs are going to be, if you're going to have access to the public healthcare, if you have to buy a private plan, and also understand what the quality of healthcare is, not only in the country, but in the city you want to move to, because healthcare can vary from region to region within a country. So you want to make sure the city that you're looking at, that you can have quick and easy access to a major hospital in case if you need any treatments or need to take care of any emergencies. And of course, it goes without saying, if you're on any special medication or have any special needs, definitely need to check to see if the resources are in place, if you have access to what you need in the place that you want to move to. So number 8 on the list is cost of living. And cost of living can actually be quite relative. So what I may think is expensive may be inexpensive for you, and vice versa. So you're really gonna have to look at what the costs are of living somewhere, look at what your income is or what your budget is, what you can afford, and think about if that's somewhere that you can live comfortably. When choosing where to go, the ninth thing on the list to consider is language. Do you speak another language, or are you eager to learn another language? When considering where to move, you need to think of, is English widely spoken there? Can you get by in English, or are you going to have to learn another language to be able to navigate life abroad? I always highly consider, if English is not the native language of where you're going to definitely put the effort in and learn the local language. But I do understand that learning languages is not easy for everybody. Just keep that in mind, because if you don't speak the same language, you may have some hurdles in the beginning of making friends or even just getting settled. Number 10 on the list is diversity. So is diversity important to you when it comes to culture, languages, ethnicity, and races? Do you want to meet people from around the world, or do you want to live somewhere that's more homogenous? I know for me, diversity was a really important factor, because coming from Houston, the most diverse city in the US, that's what I was used to. And actually, I thought Madrid was a very diverse city when I moved there, and realized while it is diverse, it was not on the level that what I was used to back home, but that's okay. But I definitely needed to live in a city where I could at least be in contact with people from all over the world. So I would also stress this if you are part of the LGBTQIA+ community, and also if you're Black, Asian, Muslim, Jewish, or any underrepresented demographic. I think it's important to just get a pulse of what it's like to live there. And you can do that by finding certain Facebook groups that are geared towards different demographics. And you can also do a Google search just to see what kind of feedback and what kind of articles are out there from people from different demographics, from their personal experiences of living in different countries or cities. Number 11 on the list are laws. So something that might seem completely normal to you might be illegal abroad. Now that doesn't mean that you shouldn't move somewhere because of that, but it's really important to understand what the laws are of the country that you want to move to. Understand things like laws for alcohol, drugs, human rights, employment rights if you're going to be working abroad, and also, like I mentioned earlier, if you're part of the LGBTQIA+ community, understand what kind of laws are in place for the country that you're going to. The next factor to consider when thinking about where to move abroad is culture. So do you like a culture that's a bit more structured or relaxed? I mean, if we take the example here of Europe, in Northern Europe, they have a much more structured culture and approach to time, something that's maybe a little more similar to the US. But here in Southern Europe, where I live, it's a bit more lax. So in Mediterranean cultures, life here moves a bit slower, and schedules can also widely vary from meal times to store hours. Things are going to be different. So this can be a welcoming change for some people, and this can be super frustrating for others. So just understand what kind of culture the place has of where you're thinking of moving to. Number 13 on the list here is safety. So safety will vary from country to country and also within city to city. In terms of safety, it's important to understand things like what the violent crime situation is like, petty crime, hate crime. Take a look into that. And if you actually look at the Global Peace Index of the safest countries in the world, you'll get a list there of the top 50 or top 100, I think. And a lot of European cities make the top 50. And I don't think it's surprising to say that the US didn't even make the top 50. But another tool that you can use to determine the safety of a city is to check sites like Travel Safe Abroad. Travel Safe Abroad has detailed reports on the dangers that you can find in each place around the world. Of course, you're going to want to use a few different resources, and again, tap into expat groups to understand from people who are actually living there that they can give you their perspective of the safety and any safety concerns that maybe you should have when considering a certain country or city. All right, and we are getting close to the end here of my list of what factors you should consider when moving abroad. And number 14 on the list are taxes. Taxes is a super hot topic for expats. And like many things, taxes also are going to vary greatly by country and depend on a lot of criteria, such as your earnings, your assets, how many days you've resided in a country, and maybe a few more factors. It really just depends. But one thing you can count on is that your worldwide income is subject to U.S. income tax regardless of where you live in the world. Yes, no matter where you live or how long you've lived somewhere else, you're always going to have to file taxes in the U.S. Find yourself a certified expert who specializes in expat taxes for the country that you want to move to, and just start that conversation so you understand what your obligations may be. Also, look into the double taxation agreement and see if the country you want to move to has that with the U.S. That's a great perk because that that protects you for being taxed twice in this country that you've moved to and the US. Number 15 on the list is accessibility. If you are a person with a disability or visually impaired, it's really important to understand what the resources are like where you're moving to. I'll use the example of Europe again. So for many European cities, they are built on centuries old infrastructure. And that means that a lot of times they are less accessible for people with disabilities than in the US, because we have newer buildings that maybe were built with accessibility in mind. So think cobblestone streets or lack of elevators, wheelchair ramps, and resources for the visually impaired, such as braille on signposts or tactile strips. Those may be lacking in many cities. So understand what the accessibility is in the city and the country that you're interested in moving to. All right, that was supposed to be the last one, but I actually have a bonus one for you. I forgot one, and that is your personal interests and preferences. You should definitely keep those in mind when choosing which country you want to move to abroad. Think about what's important to you, the quality of life you want to have, how you want to spend your time, and what you want to do, and see if that matches up with the city and the country that you're thinking of moving to. All right, we did it. And I hope these 16 tips and factors help you narrow down the best country and city in the world for you. But if you need more resources, please check out my book, I'm Outta Here, An American's Ultimate Visa Guide to Living in Europe. And again, I identified the 17 easiest countries to move to in Europe based on viable visa options. Also, if you're a woman age 30 and over, please join my community, She Hit Refresh, where you can meet thousands of other women who want to move abroad or who have already done so. You'll find tons of resources, information, and inspiration to help you with your move abroad. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a like, subscribe to my channel, and turn on notifications so that you don't miss out on any move abroad content.